Hello, and welcome to our ChatGPT, Sydney, and Bard, the Next CI Analyst, a webinar presented by the Council of Competitive Intelligence Fellows. My name is JP Ratajczak, and I'll be your moderator for today. As some of you may have noticed, the title of our webinar is already out of date. That's okay. Technology moves fast. And today we're not going to talk about a specific product or specific solution, but we're going to talk about the concept of generative artificial intelligence. And if you have no idea what that means, that's okay. We'll get there. As you probably saw when you logged into Zoom, there is a poll, a 3-question poll that if you could fill out would be very helpful in us tailoring the conversation today. So as you're looking at that, and getting your coffee and all your other things ready for today's talk, I'd like to go into just a little bit of background. That's what we do, right? We have to understand the past because this technology of generative AI is important. It is what some are calling potentially revolutionary. And if we look back as our roles as competitive intelligence professionals, there have been a couple of these in the past. So all but the very youngest of us on the call will probably remember when information started to be digitized. So you no longer had to pick up a copy of the paper to see an article or go to the library to pick up an annual report or wait for a conference to go pick up a pamphlet from one of your competitors. That was no longer happening. So that when information started to become digitalized, democratized, it became available to everyone, and it changed the way that we performed our jobs significantly. Then after that, another major milestone was the introduction of software and making that really approachable. I would say that with all of that digital information that we are now ingesting, we needed a way to sort it all, to store it all, to retrieve it all. And that was another major milestone when we had software available to us. And now I think we're on the cusp of something else, perhaps another revolution. That's generative AI. And we're going to have a discussion about whether we're there or not, but the ability to provide analysis, to take a set of information and provide original thought, that's something we're going to be talking about today. So as we get into it today, I'm going to introduce our panelists here in a moment, but a little bit of housekeeping before we do that. Let's see here. We'll get back to this good stuff. First off, the CI Fellows Summit. So September 27th to 28th, you're going to want to mark your calendars. We're going to be talking about competitive intelligence. And we're going to be discussing transforming new realities and what that means. So as with all of the Fellows Summits, you want to make sure to attend that. Also, if you didn't catch the CI Fellows Quarterly, you want to make sure you check your favorite social media channels for a link to that. You'll see interviews with former fellows, or not former fellows, but with fellows and some other great information in there. And then for today, we want this to be interactive. So the chat is enabled in Zoom. Use that, ask questions with the Q&A. And if you're on social, CI Fellows webinar would be a great place to do all of that as well. So with that, I'd like to introduce our panel. And first up is Cynthia Cheng Correia. Now, Cynthia helps professionals and organizations advance their insights and foresight capabilities to enhance planning, decision, and performance outcomes. For over 2 decades, she's brought robust and innovative insight and foresight programs, systems, and solutions to wide-ranging teams and companies. She's the managing director at Knowledge Inform, and she is the founding past president of the Council of Competitive Intelligence Fellows, developer of SLA's Competitive and Decision Intelligence Certificates program. And Cynthia has been recognized for her instructional excellence for her master's program level instruction, appeared in leading publications, including the New York Times, and the award-winning The Emerald Handbook of Modern Information Management. Cynthia, thank you for joining us. At this point, I was wondering if you wanted to give a couple of opening remarks, couple of comments, some things you want to be talking about today, areas you want to explore.
Yeah, thank you so much, JP, for this introduction and background. It's an exciting time to be alive.
I can't hear you, Cynthia.
Oh, okay. For
the record, I hear you.
You can. You're good. You're good.
Oh, okay. It's an exciting time to be alive. Uh, I'm of the generation, I think, as most of you are, in great company, who have lived through the dot-com boom, where we saw really the advent of the information age. And we're really at the cusp here. I think we've entered the age of AI. And so we're really in the front row seat. We're in the first line. We're the first generation. And what a privilege it is to have witnessed both. I look at the next generation coming up, and they'll only know this world, but we have the advantage of not only foresight, but we'll be able to look back on lessons learned. And I think it's going to be very important for us to be able to apply those lessons into this brave new world that we are entering, and hopefully we're creating as participants rather than as bystanders. So I do just want to say that, and then we'll dive more deeply. But just to also say that whatever we talk about today is really just going to be the tip of the iceberg. So I do look forward to more conversations with the community over the next few years and ensuing decades.
Fantastic. Thank you, Cynthia. Next up, we have August Jackson, Vice President of Market Intelligence, Competitive Strategy at Deltek. August is a recognized expert in applying emerging technologies to market and competitive intelligence. He's the immediate past president of the Council of Competitive Intelligence Fellows and a past chair of the Strategic and Competitive Intelligence Professionals, and produced and hosted the first podcast on competitive intelligence. August, you are no stranger to technology. What are you looking forward to talking about today?
Hey, JP, I've been looking forward to this webinar for so long. You can't even begin to imagine how excited I am that this moment is finally here. And that's both in the moment of this webinar and the opportunity to speak to my fellow competitive intelligence professionals about these exciting technologies that are emerging into the mainstream, and also at this moment in technology as well. I do tend to be an optimist, I'll admit that. Cynthia's already hit on a great point that we are at one of those really important inflection points in terms of technology and in terms of our profession. I remember when useful search engines were new, and all of a sudden, a lot of functionality that previously had been sort of the competitive intelligence priesthood, all of a sudden became somewhat democratized. And the value add that a good competitive intelligence professional could deliver moved from finding information to interpreting an overwhelming amount of information. And I think we're at another one of those moments where the horizon of value that we as CI professionals can deliver is changing. And how we as a profession and how we as individual professionals progress through this transformation really depends on how we adapt and how we take advantage of those opportunities. Spoiler alert, I think a lot of the opportunities have to do with communication and psychology and some of the things that we've previously thought about as soft skills. And that's one of the reasons I'm also excited about the summit that everybody needs to put on their calendar for later this year, because we are going to dive deep into those topics. But we are at a very exciting inflection point, and I'm really excited to dive into the topic with my fellow panelists.
It's a good point. So I'm guessing, August, you too cringe when you hear anyone say, "Oh, can I just Google that?" You remember people used to say that?
You're just CI, you're just Googling things, right?
Exactly. All right. And also, we've got Craig McHenry, a biopharmaceutical intelligence professional who provides decision makers with insights and information, giving them the luxury of time to choose and act wisely. Currently, he's the Senior Director of New Business Development for the Avis Group, an intelligence boutique located outside Chicago, and leverages over 2 decades of intelligence and analytics experience. He was instrumental in forming the first business and competitive intelligence function at Wyeth Pharmaceuticals, and has been a member of SCIP since 1993, and is a graduate from the Glad Herring Academy of Competitive Intelligence. Welcome, Craig.
Thank you, JP. Pleasure to be here, and honored to be joining my fellow colleagues. I was thinking about I was actually in the very first class, the Academy of Competitive Intelligence. I remember one of the instructors saying that if you had a database, even if it's just note cards, you don't need anything else. And we've traveled pretty far since then. In fact, my time at Wyeth was part of the people who ushered in the day-to-day use of the intranet, the World Wide Web. And I recall fondly, as August said, one of my senior directors of a product area saying, "I guess I don't need you anymore. I have Google." And that didn't last very long because he more or less came to me a month later and said, okay, it's like drinking from a fire hose. I can't do this. And I think we're at the cusp of the next big revolution. One of my kids asked the other day what a cassette was. And so I realized that there's a lot in the younger generation that just is totally lost on them, but they're on the ground floor, a front row seat, so to speak, of what AI can do and natural language processing, which seems to be a consistent theme across all the different platforms. So looking forward to what that will show, and what the CI profession as a part of that will shape and arrive for tomorrow's information.
Yes, absolutely. Great. Well, looking forward to all your contributions. So why don't we start getting into it? And actually, before we do that, I'll just remind everyone, use the chat function, use the Q&A function, fill out that poll. Looks like 80% of you have participated. That's great. We'll get a couple more here. Before we go into the results of that, let me just talk really quickly, a little bit of history for those who have no idea what generative artificial intelligence is. Actually, it's a nearly century-old technology that we just now have the computational power to pull off. And what you can think of it in its most simplest terms is autofill. So being able to take a word and figuring out what word comes after it next to make sense to the prompt that it's been given. We've talked a little about communications and soft skills already. August mentioned those. That's a topic we're going to dive into a little bit. And as I mentioned in the very front of this talk, no longer are we talking about ChatGPT, or no longer should we just be talking about ChatGPT, but also GPT-4, which in the past few weeks has been the new release from OpenAI, the company that also released ChatGPT. And what GPT-4 can do is accept longer inputs of text. We're talking 25,000 words compared to the 3,000 that ChatGPT could, and should therefore produce some more factual type of responses. There was a Microsoft research paper that came out just in the past couple of days that talked about GPT-4's ability to achieve human level performance on novel and difficult tasks in domains ranging from mathematics and coding to vision, medicine, law, and psychology, and concluded that it could reasonably be viewed as an early yet still incomplete version of an artificial general intelligence system. It's a pretty big statement. And if we could, just one more thing before we get started. Within 5 days of its release, ChatGPT had over 1 million users. Think about that, 1 million users in 5 days. The pace with which it spread was unprecedented. If you think about Facebook, it took them 10 months to reach 1 million users. Obviously, a little bit of a different tool, but to give you a sense of how quickly this has taken off. But there are a lot of questions. There are a lot of considerations. And one of the most pressing, one I think that we've heard resonate within the CI community is this trustworthy? Is this something that we can actually use and believe in? So right now, given where it's at, August, let's start with you. What's your take on that? Is it something that we can and should be using in intelligence function right now?
So the short answer is that I do think ChatGPT, and we're using ChatGPT and generative AI interchangeably, and sure. Bear with me. It's the new Google in terms of, or the new Kleenex or Xerox. But I do believe it is a technology that has a place in in intelligence practices today. And then the question becomes, well, can we trust it? And the reality is I never trust a single source anyway. So it becomes another input into the existing processes. One of the things I think is really interesting, I mentioned before that the whole branding point, we might get to a point where we actually ask multiple generative AI models or technologies for their input into an intelligence topic or question as well. So you can actually see a situation emerging where multiple generative AI platforms are themselves sources in a broader portfolio of sources. So that's kind of the case. I think good intelligence professionals always have that sense of skepticism, and really are reluctant to over-index on single sources anyway. And I don't think generative AI as a category or ChatGPT or other examples of specific instances change that healthy skepticism.
That's a good point. I just ended our poll. I forgot about that. I got so into talking about this. August, you mentioned the word generative. And for those of you who participated in the poll or taken a look, most of you got the question right about what does GPT stand for in ChatGPT. So that's good. Great party trick. 6 of you, I'm sure you find the humor within the people who are developing these tools. The second one, have you used any generative AI tools? Pretty close when it comes to I've tinkered once or twice or never touched them. So we're talking with a spectrum of users, but ones that are, I think, testing the waters right now. And for the final poll question, what's your prediction on how long it will be until generative AI becomes integrated into the work of most CI professionals? We're thinking that it already is, or 1 to 2 years. So Cynthia, you mentioned in your opening that we are in the age of AI. How do these results jive with what you think or where we're at right now?
It makes sense. It's going to be a bit uneven, chaotic. Even at the other end of the spectrum, there will be people who will sit back and wait and see for various reasons. Not simply because they don't trust the tools, but it may also be that there's the cost of using it. And I don't mean necessarily ChatGPT and some of the free tools, but some of the more robust tools, or even ChatGPT Plus, when we're talking about that level. But certainly, if you want access to GPT-4 right now, you have to pay for it. And right now, yes. And Sam Altman, the head of OpenAI, says that it's just tremendously expensive to run these tools right now. So there are a number of different barriers that we need to look at, psychological ones, sometimes functional, operational ones, it's sometimes even down to corporate policies. We'll see organizations starting to implement various types of policies regarding use cases. Because you have to set rules and standards when you have some high stakes. The other thing too that I want to loop back to is the matter of trust. When we talk about trust, I think it's very important that we don't focus purely on the CI practitioner. When we talk about trust, it's also addressing the trust of our users and throughout that our distribution chain, if you will. And I'm an optimist like August, so I have to curb my optimism bias very often. So, but to be mindful of it, is half the battle. But so I do hope that people will be aware of the fact that there is misuse, there will be mistrust based on this, and there's also going to be a ramping up of efforts to try to have people mistrust these systems, and sometimes for good reason. So, and I'll get to, I'll help to touch on that in a bit, but the idea here is that as Intel practitioners, we will need to deal with the trust issues of our users from the standpoint of some of them are simply not going to trust these tools. So you can multi-source all you want to, but they're going to say, oh, no, not touching this. So we need to be prepared for that. On the other end of the spectrum, we also have to be aware, and we know this, there are too many people who are willing to trust the first thing they see. And August, you're nodding your head. And so seeing is believing. And there is that pull for a lot of people, and you want confirmation, you have confirmation bias and you want to believe. So it's really important that we're mindful of trust issues in our environment, including in our users, not just whether or not we should trust these tools.
Those are good points. As I was coming up with some of the marketing language for this webinar, I asked ChatGPT to write a promo for this webinar, and it identified of 3 people, identified 2 of them incorrectly in terms of their credentials, but it sounded really confident. So that's something we have to be watching out for. Absolutely. Craig,
we need to be prepared to be dealing with maybe even internal disinformation in ways that we never have before, because people are going to be using these tools, or it's going to come over the transom and land in their inboxes, through whatever they see on Twitter or elsewhere, and or Mastodon, as people are talking about in the chat. And so And so, as this happens, we need to be prepared to be able to help redirect that. And that's something new for a lot of Intel practitioners, because this is going to be magnified.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Sharon shared in the chat that JP Morgan has outlawed the use of ChatGPT by its professionals. There will be different levels of adoption here. Craig, I'm wondering if from your perspective, if you can talk to that, whether it's your specific industry or others, and which ones we may see more willing to adopt technology like this, even given some of these trust pitfalls that we've already been talking about.
Yeah, no, it's very powerful. In fact, you talked about creating some verbiage around the webinar here, and I know that one of the interesting things I've seen in using the technology is its ability to take something that's already written and rewrite it in the style of something else. So rewrite it in the style of William Shakespeare, and it comes out sounding just like he wrote it many years ago. But you speak of the confidence and the trust issues. I know that in California, kind of trying to stay on top of everything that's happening, the California bar has said that lawyers cannot use this technology, even though some of them had really basically had it implanted into Google Glass or that type of thing, where it could listen and provide them information in their earpiece, and then help them formulate questions. And their point was that it's practicing without a license. And so it'll be interesting to see where the courts take this. In the pharmaceutical industry, which is a very information-intensive area, AI has already made its mark in many areas like discovery and in basic research, which is all about looking at molecules and proteins and enzymes and seeing how they're going to interact and what's going to make different things do different things or prevent or cause different adverse event and reactions. I think at the end of the day, the trust issue is going to be stripped away, or at least layered back a little bit, and we'll understand more as this becomes a ubiquitous in terms of being everywhere, that we really have to ask ourselves who's training these systems. They all claim to have some deep learning or natural language processing, and I've seen too many examples in the media about people basically putting these things in a box where they ask them a couple questions and they say, well, I remember reading about this. What do you have to say? And they says, oh, I made a mistake. And that's because even though it speaks with confidence, many times that confidence hides the fact that it's biased. And I've been a CIA analyst type person for many years, and we always use wiggle words, things like this might happen or this is likely to happen, and the AI just comes out and says expect this, and that can be a problem. And I think we need to be very aware of that, especially in the early days. I know one of the biggest issues in talking to a number of colleagues about this was the fact that they got results but no references. There was nothing that said this came from this source, or at the earnings call, 2 years ago, the company said XYZ, and now it's saying ABC. So there's still, I think, a lot of information in terms of making it available for everyone. We may be missing the fact that it still requires very careful manipulation, and we can talk more as we go on about the idea of prompting. And I know all of our analysts were trained in how to do a good research interview, and that seems to be where this technology is at right now.
Yeah. Jay, I liked your comment in the chat about, is this just nicely formatted garbage in, garbage out? That's probably not the marketing tagline they're going to use, but let's dig on that topic of prompting, because I think a lot of people have this fear that, oh my gosh, this is really going to impact my job or even replace me. Someone mentioned, as a librarian 15 years ago, that was a true fear. But there are skills that we've learned to adapt to, or to improve over time. So back when we were talking about when information became digitalized, there are different skills then we had to become more proficient at. So one you mentioned, Craig, is prompting. Do you want to expand on that a little bit farther?
Sure. So in the today's vernacular, in this particular area, the idea of prompting is asking questions and providing information such that the AI, the generative AI bot, whatever you call it, is able to understand what it is you're looking for. Because otherwise, it's basically just going to kick out whatever it finds or whatever it stumbles across first. And so prompting becomes a very important skill in terms of asking for specific answers to your questions, but also providing some boundaries or some domains of information, some ways in which you're asking this to gather information for you, but with these restrictions or with these particular caveats already in place. And it can change a lot. In preparing for this, I had asked it a number of different questions, and depending on what I ask it, it gave me a lot of different answers. And one of the most basic questions was, is this going to replace competitive intelligence? And it said, oh, no, that's not going to happen. Of course, that was probably, again, something it was programmed to say, but it also brought up the issue of legalities and doing things in an ethical manner, which I'm sure is something else that it's been taught or been trained on quite a bit. So prompting is really akin to the old research interviews we used to do as analysts, which is, okay, you asked me to find out everything this company is doing. Do you really mean everything? And asking them through a series of questions to give you a better sense of what it is you're looking for and how can I help you.
I'd like to also add to that, when we're talking about prompt engineering, there are a number of techniques that we already know work. And so it's, so for example, the four W's, so as we're iterating, through the prompts, to be able to incorporate elements of, the what and the, who and why. And so, and the more we can massage that, if you will, the better the output. So that's already very well known. However, as ChatGPT and GPT-4, well, as the APIs, I should say, for ChatGPT and GPT-4 become available, and organizations are creating their own layer, and they're also exploiting their own internal proprietary content to augment the large language model itself. That's another layer then that we have to scrutinize. It's not just about what ChatGPT's training and data are telling you. It's also the data now that you are putting on top of that. And so one of the promises that we see is that ChatGPT has a browser API that's coming online, and that will augment the the data that's trained on now, which is only until fall of 2021. Well, with this browser API, it'll look for content in the open web as well, and synthesize that. So that's going to address that gap that we've known. And but then there's also, as I said, the proprietary layer. So now we have layers of data integrity that we need to be careful and then we need to be mindful of. And so for Intel info practitioners that are using these tools, we need to be very, very aware of how these tools work. It's not good enough to treat it like another Google on steroids. Because what we're going to see within the next 3 years is a proliferation and explosion of APIs in a number of different, and not just for ChatGPT or any of the OpenAI products, but for other platforms as well. We've been focusing on this, and hyper focused on OpenAI and specifically these two models. But there are many, many other models that are being created as well. And so we need to become more technically proficient about all of this, simply because our work depends on it. So I just want to caution us from being too focused on the here and now in terms of the tools, in terms of what's in the headlines, and look to what else is happening and what the signals are. And JP, you mentioned the Sparks paper that came out, and I see a lot of signals in that one. So even though GPT-4, they use the full version, and many of the features are not in the wild, but some of the various tests that they put it against is really mind-blowing. The fact that it can create an entire disinformation campaign through an ask, right? They asked it to create a disinformation campaign. They created a campaign from the planning stage, to the actual materials that could be deployed. Images, multimedia, et cetera, et cetera. That's mind-blowing, and that happened like that. You don't have to take time to, to invest in that. So we're going to be confronting a lot of these types of issues. There's also the theory of mind. So GPT-4 right now, in its developed version, not released, is able to peer into, if you will, the mindset and the drivers of individuals. That's management analysis, my colleagues. And granted, it's not available now, and because they're very cautious. OpenAI is very cautious about releasing those functionalities. But those are the capabilities we need to be looking at. It's not the capabilities in our desktop right now. I'm not concerned about that as much as I'm concerned about all of those other things, and trying to understand the implications of that to Intel practices, and as well as to the broader society.
Yeah, and one of the things to keep in mind here, and I think this is a similar situation to the search engine revolution as well, is that the motivated Intel Pro is much more likely to really understand a lot of those points, Cynthia, are those opportunities that these technologies make available. One of the things that I think so many of the CI professionals on this call probably recognize is, just as with search engines, many of our stakeholders will go to the prompt and enter the first thing that pops into their mind and feel like that addresses the need, and that takes advantage of all of the power that's available. And either through lack of interest or inability to take the time to learn how to use some of the more advanced capabilities, will never go further down that path. And so in terms of being optimistic about the profession, just knowing how CI professionals and other information professionals historically respond to tools that are available like this, my sense is we'll always be a couple of, let's say, a couple of lessons ahead of our stakeholders in terms of what the powerful tools are. So things like the add-on, the add-ons or the APIs, that you were just talking about, or the specific model that gets into theory of mind. I think some of our stakeholders won't take the time to learn how to use that, and won't take the time to learn how to use that systematically in a process. So, I think we just solved the profession's longevity concerns right there.
Well, that's such an interesting point. And this takes us back to our initial private conversations about this topic, right? I think that I'm a little bit wary of some of the comments about how we have job protection because of all the pitfalls that we see. Those are the pitfalls that we see. We know what to look for. But a lot of people who are making hiring decisions, who have impressions, perspectives about these tools, they see it differently. They're not necessarily going to see what we see. They're going to be distracted by a lot of things, including sales pitches, right? That's always happened, and over-promising, and so and let's not underestimate the other biases too. And biases, I think, tremendous in all of this. But that when you're looking at where other industry players are in this and what they're doing, you're going to want to keep up with them, and you may not necessarily make the most judicious decisions about these things. And we saw that actually when during the .com when the advent of Google. A lot of librarians lost their jobs for a couple of years during that ensuing recession. And they didn't get it back for some time, really until people realized, oops, you're saying, Craig, it's not as easy as I thought. But there was still carnage for a little while. So I just want to caution us about not being biased as well, right? Because we're biased in knowing what we know. But we still have to be open to other perspectives and how they view this, and they may not share, our concerns, because hubris, overconfidence with these tools at our fingertips, it makes us feel like superpowers, right? So I think we need to be careful, and also it's very important to understand that right now during this transition, generative AI, is supporting task level, point level work. So that's fun for a lot of the geeks, but it's not really transformational in the sense that what's coming down the pike is going to be more systematic changes where when you have AI embedded throughout the organization, not just along certain functions and silos within the organization, but now it's integrated, that system now can be mined for intel. And at that point, does that render any aspects of intelligence or any functions obsolete? Because it puts some of the decision makers closer to the outputs. And so will intel teams shrink? Will it sometimes even replace entire intel teams, because hey, salespeople overpromise, right? And so I just want to caution us from being too confident about what this means, because there are a number of reasons, number of ways in which this could work to the disadvantage of intel practitioners. And as a community, we just have to have our antennae up about this and work towards creating an optimal future, an optimal state for our community and our users, as opposed to just letting it take shape however it wants to.
That's a good point.
We need to be there influencing that. Go ahead, Craig. Yeah.
No, I was going to say, we mentioned ChatGPT 4, and I was looking at some of the features, some of the things that it does, and we mentioned obviously the bigger input parameters allowed. In fact, I saw an example where it basically took a few pages of tax code law or regulations and generated a tax filing for a fictitious couple. But basically it was correct. And so that's the type of information processing we're talking about. But it also took an image of a script written by a doctor and read the handwriting, which, as you know, doctors have some horrible handwriting. So we're just on, I think, the frontier of creating not just, like you said, points of individual processing, but a system or a knitting together things. And I know in the CI space, especially in a company like a pharma company, where there are silos of information, suddenly now this technology can break down those silos just by making them available to the technology such that it can be searched across. And you can suddenly find out that this part of the organization thinks one thing and another part of the organization thinks something else, or maybe they're on the same page, or maybe that's redundant. I mean, there's a lot of things that we as information and CI professionals could do to begin that process now of breaking down those silos or continuing to break down those silos such that we can begin to raise the intelligence of the organization and make people aware of what's going on. Of course, the natural reaction may be for people to stop putting information down in writing because at least at the moment, the AI program can't reach out and tell us what's in our head. I don't know if that'll be a strategy, but at some point it may be.
Humans are really good at explaining things, right? And having conversations like this and providing those wiggle words that you were talking about before, Craig, and not seeming overly confident. But let's fast forward a few years. Let's get out of the here and now. Let's not worry about what's happening or what capabilities are here today. What are some of the things that we need to be preparing for as CI professionals, as information professionals, to make sure that in 3 years, we're not part of that carnage that Cynthia was talking about that may potentially come from some executives saying, I'm an armchair analyst, I can figure this out myself.
I'm happy to kickstart this. I think in the next 3 years in particular is going to be an important transition period, because we are moving, there will be a proliferation of tools that are going to be addressing the task level for sure. And we've been seeing this. So that's just really an extension of where we've been with AI. But what we're going to be seeing more is a movement towards what's called application level AI. And so that will be tools that doesn't just handle one task. But we've already seen this with the announcement of Microsoft 365 Copilot. So for those of you who haven't seen that, check out that rollout video, because it is damn impressive. And it'll give you a sense of what it means, to synthesize across different applications. And so when we're talking about this, it's really tools that will help support entire departments in doing what they do. And so, for example, some of you may have seen a web developer just sketch on a pad handwriting, messy handwriting, instructions for developing a website. Just, hey, just follow this, and just use and using that image. Okay, just that image. ChatGPT 4 was able to create a website. It's a rudimentary one, but it still did that, right? Alpha Omega. Pretty cool. So that's application level work. And so we're going to be seeing that mostly, I think, over the next 3 years. But some of the larger players, those with the deep pockets and a tremendous need and vision, are going to start putting together systems that I mentioned, really tying together these various types of application layers, into something that is just going to funnel all the way up, and you're going to have more executive insights from that. So we need to be thinking about the next 3 years as a transition towards something more systematic. At the same time, the next 3 years is going to feel as if we are drinking from the fire hose, because it's going to be very, very difficult for us to keep track of all the different tools that have intelligence use cases. Many of them will not bill themselves as Intel tools, but they are going to be tremendously helpful in search, in synthesis, in analysis, and other applications. And so for those who are really good at sleuthing that and being able to implement those tools, that's going to be a competitive advantage that we need to be mindful of. So that's I think a very important piece. And I urge people to have a transition plan. We've already begun to do this, actually, for my clients and me, and also in the training that I do, is incorporate AI into these pieces. What to do, what if, what is this going to look like, what are the targets, and under which conditions will you implement certain types of tools? And that also includes establishing various policies and rules. So we need to be thinking about that. And by the way, that is what is going to increase our value to our users. It's that kind of upskilling, that type of system management that we're moving towards, that's going to help Intel practitioners remain relevant, as opposed to being supplanted, having our OSINT supplanted, or even human. I just saw a flash that Ellen saying, well, what about human? Well, there are, if you look at Microsoft 365 Copilot, it can mine email, it can mine customer content. And so when we're talking about mining for codified human intelligence within an organization, right, that's done. So it's really more elicitation skills, it's maybe more Delphi panels, more higher. So it's all about the upskilling and higher level work.
Yeah, that last point, and Ellen's question is a great prompt. So Cynthia, that the combination of the two start to pull me in the direction of thinking about some of the sales enablement tools and sales technology today, where all of the conversations that our sellers are having with customers and prospects are being recorded and evaluated by artificial intelligence, and thinking about the potential for generative AI to look at that and move beyond what really is kind of a glorified keyword identifier to summarize the findings of those things. And we had a great discussion in our private chat about, well, is that secondary intelligence or is that primary intelligence? Is that OSINT or is that human? What is that? And it's kind of, the answer is kind of yes, to all of those. It's kind of all of them. It's a new kind, it's AI int. I don't know if we're ready for another int or not. But those transformations are going to be all over the place in terms of the competitive intelligence tools and processes that we're using today. AI is going to find its way into all of them. Now, with your framework in mind, that they're the tools today, and we have to think about the roadmap, because it is a very rapidly changing roadmap. And we're kind of living through the early moments of that, and I think the acceleration is only going to get faster. But to think about what we're going to do, where we're going to incorporate these tools, and where we would be likely to incorporate tools that we can speculate on and kind of extrapolate based on existing capabilities, and then also think about the skills we need to develop in order to do that. Evidently, it's not generative AI that's keeping track of the lighting in this room because it thinks I'm not here. but to think about having the tools that are available to to do that, and how we would adapt our processes and our capabilities to those, and that will need to be a continual exercise of very aggressive ongoing learning for CI professionals.
And we need to rely on one another. We
Mm.
cannot work in siloed fashion. This CI community becomes even more important.
That's a great point.
It
Yeah.
serves as the eyes and ears, because we simply can't keep up with with being inundated. But I also feel like some folks are already talking about, hey, I'm using AI to help launch my search, right? And I really do want to caution people about that. This is also part of our private conversation too, where I still prefer to use these tools to augment after the fact. So what I mean to say by this is that for the foreseeable future, next 3 years or so, we cannot get away from fundamental Intel best practices. Those best practices, the Intel model on which we've been trained, will serve as as the guardrails, but it will also serve as the touchstones of the best practices within that system, as we seek to validate and as we seek to affirm that these tools can do what we're doing. So, and I actually see that happening even beyond the next 3 years. And I also caution people from just starting their research using ChatGPT or any of the other generative intelligence tools because of biases. Because if whatever results that you get in your initial pass, it may serve to anchor you and along that path. So I would still prefer and urge teams to do what you've been doing, and then at key points, once you've already initiated that search in the way that you have, then bring in these tools to see what else they can do, as opposed to beginning with these tools and then seeing what else you can think about. Because if they're leading you down a path that's already biased because it's built into the content and the training, well, how would you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're anchoring and confirmation bias are real. And if we start with ChatGPT or another generative AI model with all of its flaws, then we reconstitute those flaws throughout the rest of our process. That's really smart. That you find the right places within the intelligence cycle to bring in these tools.
For now, because we are at the task level, right? Yeah, because at some point, say, I think probably between the next 3 to 5 years, we're probably going to be getting more of an integrated application wide. That's going to change the game a bit. And so, and I already have thoughts about that, but we'll deal with that when we get there, or it's for another conversation. But it's continual adjustment.
Yeah, and this is good to be talking about preparing for tomorrow today, because oftentimes we're too busy with today to even think about tomorrow. And I've kind of seen this transition once already, and I expect it to follow some of the things that are the same in the future, but totally different. I think of it when I got my first screwdriver, I could do a lot with that screwdriver. It was a tool. I could do all sorts of things, but there's some things that I wasn't quite as good at. And eventually I, improved to the point where I got a full set of handles and bits and all sorts. And no matter what type of drive that screw was, I could find the right driver for it. And I think we'll see that same type of emergence of AI as it adapts and grows over time. But the idea of using it today, using a traditional techniques and then looking at what the AI can bring, I found it very valuable just in giving it some prompts, just like I used to do with an outline, and then have it write the outline for me, and then go back and with my own information, flesh that out. And there's a lot of things that humans do today that the AI can do so much better and so much faster. Proofreading, for example, translating. There's lots of different areas where this technology can really take it to the next level. The idea of gathering information, and I've used this in a number of areas where I've looked at a therapeutic area and I know the area pretty well, but I don't really have the time to read through 3 or 4 analyst reports and the earnings calls for the company over the last year or 2. So I'll ask the AI, what are the 5 biggest oncology products for this company? And it's amazing what it says and what it comes back with. And I can compare that with what I know and what it thinks. And I think in the area of wargaming or strategic scenario analysis, there are things that you can do to have an AI say, well, what's this competitor going to do with this or with this particular product, and have it come back and tell us what it thinks, and write it up, not just in terms of the facts, but in marketing prose, add pictures. There's a lot of things that with a couple pushes of a button and 15 minutes of time used to take a day or two, and it's all right there at your fingertips. But then that's the opportunity for you with your mind and your experience to look at that and to more carefully, understand what that means and where it could go, and what we might want to do with it. And that's stuff we can do today as we prepare for the future.
Yeah, I really liked your warning there about, some things we should be watching out for. And Craig, when you're talking about just hitting a button and having it be there for us, this begs the question, it's been raised a couple of times in the chat about copyright. So what do we do? Is this something that we can use? Obviously, it's not sourcing. This is a today issue, right? So it's not sourcing content. But in terms of copyright, any words, best practices, anything like that you want to pass along to our attendees?
So several conversations I've been really very keen to follow are related to actually by generative AI for imaging. So when you think of Stable Diffusion or DALL-E or Midjourney, the training corpus that those generative AI models have been following for the ability to generate images has basically been any image or picture that's been published to the World Wide Web, and they have really run completely roughshod over copyright concerns, and that is coming back and is actually being litigated right now. And it's really, there are two or three things that kind of come to a head on, then, well, can a generative AI model violate copyright? The Getty Images is suing, I think they're suing OpenAI over DALL-E or another, because all of a sudden, if you say like, hey, create a Getty Images like picture of me on the red carpet at the Oscars, it'll go there and it'll have like the little Getty Images thing in the corner, which is kind of a sign that you've arrived if you show up in real Getty Images photo. But the people who own the Getty Images company, the Getty company, looks at that and they're like, hey, that's an indication that you're violating our copyright with your learning corpus, and so we're going to take you to court over that. And so that's something that's being litigated right now. I don't think we could speculate all we want, but the courts and as that runs through its process, and other lawsuits will come to fore. Whether or not the models themselves, their output can be copyrighted, can be copywritten, or also keeping in mind these are online platforms, so they're also running up against Section 230 protections, whereby they or are they not liable for what they produce if they produce defamatory content, or if they produce libelous content, or if they produce content that's deemed dangerous in that saying yelling fire in a crowded theater way. Those are all questions that need to be resolved. I'll open it up to the other panelists, but at this point, I would not feel comfortable coming up with a definitive answer. And I would also not take anything, just as a general rule, I would not take anything ChatGPT or any other generative model produces and just turn around and produce that as a commercial product.
Yeah,
mostly out of those concerns.
Yeah, you hit a great point there, and I would add to it the fact that anything that we put into a generative AI system, have we basically tossed out all rights of privacy or other? I mean, I know the chat has mentioned this in some of its comments, that anything you add as a prompt or that you put into a system suddenly now is part of the information infrastructure, and theoretically is not only available to you again, but to your competitors or to other people who want to read that. So this raises a whole lot of questions. I think in the old days, we had it on a piece of paper and there was a copyright. You notice we knew that. What's the equivalent to that in this type of environment?
Well, something I want to note that's really practically important on a practical basis is that the Copyright Office, the government's Copyright Office, has announced that if you generate a product that is informed by AI and you don't disclose it, you lose your copyright. So I think that that is going to help corral behavior a little bit. Now, of course, there are still questions that that are still being explored that need to be addressed. But that's one piece. The other piece is the commercial side. So what we've also seen too to address this very issue is NVIDIA. It's a lot of people, in all the talk about OpenAI's products, we neglected that collectively, not in this session, that NVIDIA has just made a tremendous announcement about their AI capabilities. And so they announced not only their AI platform, on which people can build their own AI system, so you don't have to necessarily have your own GPU, right? That's huge. That's opening access. But they also have NVIDIA AI, and that particular suite of tools includes Picasso. And Picasso is the tool that is in partnership also with Getty and others. So if you're using tools like this, then it's copyright cleared. And so it gives organizations assurance that we're going to see more of that, actually. So this is really one of the major developments in this space. We're going to see more of that in text as well, as publishers, aggregators, start to, offer these tools or collaborate, with some of the large language, model platforms as well. So we're just at the very beginning of this. We're going to see some of these questions resolved. So let's keep our antennae up for this, because that's going to help us tremendously in addressing a lot of these issues. Because on the government side, there's already been announcements. On the commercial side, products are being developed to address just this. And then, of course, internally, we need to have our own policies about uses and reuse, right? If we're thinking about Intel KM, because if we're publishing something we've generated, it goes into a client report. Now we've disseminated it, and then what if it's not cleared? So these are all the things that we have to be thinking about. But there are already solutions in place that we can begin to adopt.
So much to pull on. There's no way we could have covered everything in this topic, but hopefully everyone, if you've been listening out there, paying close attention, you feel a lot more informed and even have a lot more questions, and understand that we need to do a lot more research and learning about this to be more prepared for the future. So before we close, we got a couple minutes left. If I can have each of the panelists give us your closing thoughts, just a couple sentences, wrapping up today, what you're looking forward to, anything like that. We'll start the way we did. So Cynthia, if you would like to go first.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, exciting time to be alive. Double-edged sword with that, though. And so I would encourage people, though, to plan. Do not be reactive to this. We need to understand what's coming down the line. And one way of doing this is to look at where the research is, not just pay attention to what's being released out in the wild in the moment. But ChatGPT 4, for example, was already completed last year. And by the time ChatGPT 3 was announced, GPT-4 was already done. And people were already researching on that. So that helps us understand that there's already works in development that signals to us what is to come and how we should prepare. So let's keep our antennae up, and also create communities around this so we can be supportive, because we cannot do this in a siloed fashion.
Excellent. August, over to you.
I just vehemently second everything that Cynthia just said about keeping track of the research and understanding what's coming down the pike, and that you can leverage this community of practice to understand the skills and help build your own skills, and continue to experiment with what is available today. So one fun thing I didn't get a chance to talk about is I'm really excited about ChatGPT's current ability to take natural language and generate things like Excel formula or formula in R, or SQL queries, or those sorts of functionalities, to begin to democratize some of those advanced quantitative analytical methodologies that sometimes feel beyond the reach of standard CI professionals. So, an opportunity to kind of bridge that quantitative qualitative gap. That's very exciting. It's there today. Doesn't have any copyright infringement issues. So it's a great thing to bring into your toolbox already. And to Cynthia's point about being proactive as opposed to reactive, it's a great way to get started.
Yeah, the real value of what we do is in supporting good decision making, and we obviously bring a landscape methodology that looks across the whole realm of information that needs to be kind of put together and grinded up and turn the crank and come out with a good decision. And from time since I was a young boy and first even thought about this, the analyst's mind and their experience are what contributes the most. And so generative AI will be another tool. It will be a way for people who know how to do this to do it better and to do it in a way that reaches the people that they're trying to. And it'll only get better. But as Cynthia said, stay tuned. It's going to be an exciting ride.
If I may just make one final point too, that's really important for Intel practitioners in practice. Keep in mind, democratization is wonderful in many regards, but from a competitive standpoint, democratization is commoditization. So that means that more people have access to that, and you've got to up your game to be more competitive.
Absolutely. Very true. So let's all stay on top of it. Thank you, Cynthia, August, Craig. Thank you all, everyone in the audience for joining. Let's keep in touch.
Thank
Thanks
you.
so much, everyone.
Have a
This is
good
so
day.
much fun.
Take care.